The besieged district of Gaza, a podcast that will delve into the Gaza siege and its refugees, exploring their experiences, challenges and hopes amidst one of the most enduring conflicts in modern history. Beneath the Blockade, unveiling controversies surrounding the Gaza siege and its refugees. Gaza's rich history of thousands of years has been marked in the past several decades by conflict, occupation and displacement. Since the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, Gaza has been at the center of geopolitical tensions and military operations. Today, it is home to a large population of over 2.2 million Palestinians whose lives are deeply impacted by the ongoing conflict. I'll be interviewing experts who offer unique perspectives on the situation, including a doctor from Gaza.
Hello there, my name is Dr. Yahya Abu Sido.
A UK politician and war journalists who have witnessed the conflict firsthand.
I work international and especially in Syria and the Middle East.
Through these conversations, we aim to deepen our understanding of the challenges faced by the Palestinian refugees. Join us as we listen, learn and amplify the voices of Gaza refugees in their quest for justice, peace and a brighter future. Can you introduce yourself?
Ali Mahmoud. I'm a senior news editor. I worked for international news agencies around the globe, and especially in Syria and the Middle East and Iraq.
Hi, I'm Gunesh Onaki. I'm an architect.
I am British but ethnically Palestinian, which means I have family back in Palestine, and unfortunately my extended family is in Gaza and they're feeling a lot of despair.
My name is Noor Huda and I am a human rights activist.
How would you feel if you were a refugee in Gaza?
I cannot imagine what life is like for people in Gaza. I refuse to call them refugee because they're not refugees. They're seeking shelter, yes, but they're seeking shelter in their main land. This is where they were born, where they were raised. Many of them are in shock, and I assume I would be like that.
They feel like the world has completely neglected them. There's a lot of mixed feelings, but I think the biggest one is feeling neglected and betrayed by the international community.
I'll be disturbed. I'll be in tears.
How would I feel if I was a refugee in Gaza? I would feel devastated. I will be scared, upset. I would fear for my life. I would fear for my children.
Having somewhat understood the frightening conditions in the Gaza district for the Gaza refugees, I've decided to ask the following question. The current Israel and Hamas war has impacted millions of civilians within the Gaza district. Where should the refugees go?
That's a good question. That's a good question. It should be directed to Israel and also to the neighbouring countries, because literally they're in a siege. They don't know where to go.
As regarding where refugees should go, again, they're seeking refuge. They should stay in their own land.
Unfortunately, the Israel and Hamas war has impacted millions of civilians within the Gaza district.
I wouldn't call it a war. I know it's painted as Israel and Hamas war, but this is not a war. This is the fourth strongest army, I believe, in the world, bombing and destroying an entire city, all of Gaza, the entire district of Gaza. Where should the refugees go? I mean, there should be no refugees in the first place.
Dr. Yahya has then taken the initiative to further explain that the refugee crisis taking place in Gaza has been taking place for decades.
And we need to also put into perspective that the majority of people living in Gaza are refugees from Palestine pre-1948. A lot of them come from neighbouring cities such as Rafah, Akka, etc., and have been living in refugee camps within Gaza. And so the majority of the population of Gaza is not original Gazan inhabitants. My family is. The majority of them are actually refugees. And some of them still are in the north, and some of my family still in the north, refusing to leave their homes even if they die within them.
Why do you think neighbouring Arab countries are refraining from taking in Gaza refugees, and what do you think their reasons are?
I would say maybe it's down to the international treaties that they have with Israel, and maybe they are following the instructions of Israel.
The reasons are they don't want to go to war. That is it. They do not want to upset America. They do not want to go and upset Israel because they have close ties, despite what's being shared. Yes, many of them are sending aid, so they're not taking part because they're worried about their own lands, their own country.
The neighbouring Arab countries aren't taking in Gaza refugees, which is very upsetting. I personally think the reasons are they're afraid that they will take their jobs, they will need to provide shelter, and they're not committed. I was one of those war civilians. I would like the neighbouring countries to open their arms and let me in and care for me, which unfortunately isn't happening with the Gaza refugees.
Why do I think neighbouring Arab countries are refraining from taking in Gaza refugees? I mean, one of the main reasons that they publicly state is because of the fact that if the majority of the Gazan population leaves Gaza, then Israel will claim that land as theirs and there will be no Gaza left. Whilst that is an opinion that they publicly state, there are other reasons. For example, Egypt is in coordination and cooperation with Israel to ensure that the border is completely blocked. There is a security agreement, and also America has a lot of leverage. Whilst it's in Israel's interests for the population of Gaza to leave, many of the Arab leaders understand that if they were to allow this to happen and allow Gaza to be taken, their populations will be in complete uproar and they could be facing revolt and revolutions of their own within their own countries. And so they have made that a red line.
In a previous exclusive interview with myself and Jeremy Corbyn, the former UK Labour leader, made this statement.
The reality is thousands and thousands of people have either been killed in Gaza, grievously injured, or lost their homes, or are now starving, thirsty, and in need of medicine. The reality is it's a humanitarian disaster. The blockade of Gaza has now gone on for 16 years, and anyone living in Gaza suffers mentally from the inability to travel, physically the inability to get a job, and their future is always in doubt. Now, sadly, many of those are dead.
How should refugees be treated medically within this crisis? What should they eat and where should they sleep?
By being provided with medicine, they should be provided with food, they should be provided with clean water. They should have a safe place to sleep in. Unfortunately, that isn't happening in Gaza.
How refugees should be treated medically within this crisis, like any other human being, if anything, more because of what they've been exposed to. These questions are asked as basic human rights, so the answers are very clear and simple.
Generally speaking, in any war, refugees should be kept safe outside of the equation of the fighting parties. So if Israel is attacking Hamas as they're claiming, they should be looking after the refugees, allowing them to seek refuge into hospitals and to bakeries to pick up the bread. And Israel has committed various attacks on hospitals on the ground, where a Shifa hospital was an example, other hospitals too. So simply there is no safe place for the refugees to seek to.
Similarly to how Netanyahu accused a selection of UNRWA workers with dealing with Hamas, a Shifa hospital is somewhat a controversial topic. This is due to Israeli media stating that Hamas is using several Gaza healthcare facilities as bases.
There is a how should they be treated medically, and that's, respect for the healthcare system in Gaza. But then there's what's actually happening, and that's unfortunately the deliberate targeting of healthcare infrastructure with false guises under the pretext that there is Hamas there. And the majority of international organizations that have staff on the ground there have completely denied this claim and called it baseless. Now, what should they eat? I've heard stories from my own families in Gaza that unfortunately they are using hay that horses eat. They are grinding it up, trying to turn it into some form of flour, and then mixing it with water and trying to bake it in order to satisfy their hunger.
Is the international community doing enough to support the Palestinian refugees?
Not at all, not at all. I can see that the international community is failing to support the innocent civilians on the ground. They are failing to support the Palestinians, the Gazans. There is a lot of Western people are marching on the road asking for their governments to step in, but unfortunately no one is doing any real action on the ground.
I've been in Gaza many times, and whilst I want the fighting to stop immediately, that cannot be the end of the story. There has to be an end to the blockade. There has to be a resumption of aid. There has to be the ability of Gaza to become a normal place where people can live, work, trade and live their lives.
The Ukraine-Russia war, over the course of 2 years, we saw around 8,000 loss of life. 8,000 people were killed. And to think that in Gaza we have gone beyond 30,000 in a matter of 6 months is shocking. The international community is doing enough to support the Palestinian people, the Palestinian refugees? Of course not. And I would feel completely neglected and betrayed by the international community.
Few countries have showcased solidarity with the Gazan refugees. Qatar, for example, have been prime negotiators and mediators for peace and a two-state solution, in addition to providing aid for the thousands of Gazan civilians throughout the course of tens of years by His Highness Ahmad bin Khalifa and His Highness Tamim bin Hamad. The Qataris have so far taken in over 21 Emiri medical evacuation planes full of injured Palestinians. So far, Qatar has flown several thousands of injured Gazan civilians into its sovereignty to receive treatment.
I think when it comes to flying the injured from Gaza out to hospitals so that they could receive treatment, that is something that should be encouraged, because healthcare is a human right and people in Gaza no longer have access to healthcare. So I do think it's a human right and it should be encouraged, and all countries in the world should participate.
I encourage other countries to take in Gazan refugees and provide them with treatment, shelter, food, and access to clean water.
Yes, of course. Other countries should take the same action and provide help where possible. Those people, the Gazan people who are cornered, they need every single help from every single country. I would say that the neighboring countries should open their borders and start receiving them into hospitals. Gazan people are fully surrounded, fully cornered. They've got nothing. Everyone else should take a responsibility and provide help wherever possible.
China, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and dozens of Arab and non-Arab countries are calling for a two-state solution. Do you support these calls, and why?
I think the only way forward is a one-state, democratic state, one that upholds rights for everyone, Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike, with no favoritism to either group. A state cannot be democratic and fully Jewish and Jewish at the same time, because ultimately, how can you be a democracy when your state is dependent on your demographics? You know, in the UK, for example, it's a British country and there are ethnic groups. And if one day the ethnic groups ever happen to cross the 50% mark, that does not put the British Constitution at risk, nor does it violate the fundamentals of what it is to be Britain.
Two-state solution? Yeah, I say why not? I mean, that's always been the case. I don't see it happening. They all are calling for it, but it's been like this for the past 75 years.
Yes, it could be a solution for this disaster which is taking place right now. Maybe a two-state solution is something on the table that can be looked at. All what I'm concerned is those people who are cornered and they're surrounded from all sides, and they don't know where to go, simply because there is nothing. There is no place for them to go. There is no safe area for them to go to.
Of course, I support calling for a two-state solution
because everyone has the right to live peacefully wherever they wish to live. I believe that we all are equal, no matter what faith we have, no matter the colour. I believe that people should accept each other and live a happy life together. We only live once, right?
Should Egypt's Rafah crossing be opened, and why do you think the Rafah crossing is closed?
It should be open, of course. This crossing should be open to allow the refugees seeking refugee heading towards a safe area instead of being besieged inside and as well as being bombarded, being attacked. And why is it closed? That's a good question. Will be directed to the Egyptians. But as I said, it could be down to the treaties that they have with the Israeli government under instructions of USA or other parties too.
I believe the Rafah crossing should be opened to provide medicine, to provide food, to provide clean water, and also to allow people to flee.
To let aid in, to allow the humanitarian needs of the population of Gaza to be met. And the reason it's closed is to continue this increased starvation and torture of the Palestinian people. So I do think it needs to be opened. It's the least that can be done to help alleviate some of their suffering.
With regards to Egypt's Rafah crossing, Egypt has always been a long supporter of Israel. And by closing the crossing, that's the number one kind of clue that you have. It should be opened. It should be open to let aid, to let transport take place, to give access, because at the moment, Gaza is a prison. It has always been an open-air prison. Now, it's not even just open air, it's closed off from every single angle.
The Rafah crossing has a controversial history by Egypt's variety of presidents. Closed by Hosni Mubarak post his downfall in the Arab Spring, the Rafah crossing was then opened by Mohamed Morsi and then closed again after Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's coup. To this point of recording, the Rafah crossing remains closed, with many suggesting for the immense need for the Rafah crossing to be opened. One can only wonder why it remains closed. Despite the thousands of miles between Cape Town and Gaza, South Africa has also shown grave concern towards the ongoing conditions that Gazans are going through.
South Africa taking Israel to the International Court of Justice is, I think it's the best thing that has happened in the past 6 months. For the first time, there's a country out there that's trying to hold Israel accountable, and I completely agree with it. And the reason I agree with it is because if we are to continue to allow states, countries around the world to ignore international law, it sets a very disturbing standard for the future, where any country, as long as it's powerful enough, doesn't need to abide by international law.
With dozens of countries from within the GCC, the Middle East, the European Union, Asia and other continents calling for a two-state solution, the two-state solution of publicly recognizing Palestine as a state alongside the state of Israel remains a diplomatic topic that continues to be refused by Israel. Is there any final message that you'd like to address that hasn't been questioned?
I would say that history never forgets nor forgives. So those who are silent, those who are not doing any action, I would see that they are cooperating with the Israelis against these innocent people on the ground. Everyone should do their part. Everyone should act.
This is a unique point that will be remembered in the history books, 2023 to 2024, the time when the world stood silent and there's no excuse whatsoever to act ignorant or oblivious. There is no two sides anymore. How we act now defines the history books for future generations, and they will either look back, they will already look back at us in shame. I hope that there is a light at the end of this tunnel where there will be something to be proud of as a community, as an international community, that we did take action eventually and some form of justice prevailed.
I live in a safe place. I sleep in a safe place. I have clean water. I have food. My children are around me laughing, and unfortunately in Gaza it isn't happening. Their children are around them dying, which breaks my heart.
My message to everyone in political life is look at what's going on. Stop messing about, arguing about the entrails of some law, regulation or other. The reality is what's happening is vile and inhuman. Killing is vile across any border in any society. Stop now. Ceasefire now.
Is there a final message? Yes. Be human. Help. You're not going to live forever.
The Israel-Hamas war continues within the district of Gaza, with over 30,000 innocent Palestinians killed by Israel and over 2.2 million internally displaced in the midst of war with no way out. One can only wonder why the international community does not take immediate action. Ahmad El Khalaf,